welcome everybody to this, must be the third or the fourth SIG meeting, or the Operator Framework SIG. Today we have a sort of an impromptu schedule or agenda, and I'm going to let Rob give us a brief overview of the Ansible-operator and helm-operator, just to level the playing field and talk about those two things. I'm going to talk about quickly, remind everybody, if you're on this group, you probably got the announcement, but if you didn't, there's a Google group, and please sign up for that. That's how we send out announcements, so please do that, and that's where all the conversations are really happening these days. And also, I have one request from everybody. Test my survey on the Operator Framework. I'm trying to create a survey to send out to people who are interested in the Operator Framework. And I would really love you all to, especially non-Red Hatters, unless you're actually working on a specific operator, just fill the form out and let me know what else I should be asking before I put it up on the landing page for our community to do that. It's one of the ways that I'm trying to figure out what other content we need to create and share with folks, or ask to be created. Thank you for that. So without any further ado, Rob, you want to start the conversation around Ansible-operator and helm-operator?
Sure, yeah, let me share my screen really quick. I've just got some quick slides that I want to share, and then this is going to dovetail into a discussion about how the Ansible-operator and the helm-operator are getting merged into the SDK, and so we can talk through some of the specifics for that. But if you are first joining us or haven't been to the last meeting, we've had some demos of these two different types of operators, and where we're going with this is we want to have one tool that knows how to create a number of different types of operators based on technology that you're familiar with. And so so we have Golang today, and that is very well supported and pretty mature and moving along really great. And we're incubating, I'll use that word, two different other ones. We have an Ansible operator, which works like you see in this diagram on the right. Basically, it's designed for you to take existing playbooks that you've already made investment in, or you want to use from another ISV, and map those to Kubernetes events. So when the operator is instantiated or it's scaled or it needs to be failed over, you can run different playbooks to do those activities. And the way that this works is you stick it into your container. It's versioned as an immutable artifact, just like you do your application code for a container. And then you can run that operator on your cluster and then instantiate a number of objects. Here we're looking at a Tomcat operator, and so you've got your Tomcat object, and you can make those across a number of different names. What we want to do to generate this whole thing that you see on the right is figure out the plan to merge that into the existing tooling for Golang, such that when you say operator SDK new, that you then can choose from a type. And that can be an Ansible operator, it can be a helm operator, which we're going to look at in a second, or the regular Go operator. And then if we want to branch out to new things further down the line, you can do that via the same mechanism. So I'm going to switch to the helm operator, which looks very similar in the diagram to the right, except for instead of taking an existing playbook, you are looking at a chart. If you are an organization that has investment in charts and you want to operate those in a more automated and manageable way, you can put those in the container in the same type of workflow, just like you would adding your business logic to a Go operator. The cool thing about the Helm and Ansible operators is that you can do them basically by writing no code. If you have those assets, you don't have to write any of the glue logic, just like you would not have to do with the Golang operator. But in the Go case, you're going to have to write some business logic in Go. Here, you don't have to do that. So that's just like the level setting of kind of the direction that we're going to support these new types of operators. And then Haseeb was going to talk a little bit more about how we're going to start integrating some of those in. And I know some of the other folks that are working on the Ansible operator also to talk about exactly how that code is integrated.
Right. Hey, Ben. My name is Haseeb. For those who don't know me, I'm the tech lead for the team working on the operator SDK. And you have a bit of an echo? No. Okay. Yeah, just going off on what Rob mentioned about the Ansible operator. So that exists separately right now. I think I just demoed a couple of meetings ago. What we are currently trying to do is basically get all of the core packages of the Ansible operator into the SDK. And so what we want to do is basically have the SDK support generating an Ansible type project. So there's a proposal up on the operator SDK repo. I think it was actually merged last week, but it should be under the docs proposals Ansible operator. And the proposal is basically to have the SDK support generating a pure Ansible type project, which would basically use the base image of the Ansible operator. And this way, developers who are just familiar with Ansible can write up their Ansible playbooks or roles and just essentially have the SDK use the Ansible operator image to have an operator that uses those playbooks. So they just have to write pure Ansible code in that case. And having the Ansible operator packages inside of the SDK would actually also give us the option of generating a hybrid operator, which would let developers use basically Ansible playbooks, as well as they can use any of the core Ansible operator packages to mix in any Go code that they want over there. So they can write a more traditional operator in that sense. So I just wanted to kind of highlight this and point this out. It's still a work in progress. I think we've got most of the packages reviewed and merged in, and we should be starting work on modifying the operator SDK CLI to actually support generating an Ansible type project. So there's PRs out for that in the repo right now. And we don't have a proposal around the helm-operator right now. We're trying to finish up the work on the Ansible operator first, but I would imagine it would actually be quite similar to the Ansible operator. So we still need to get a proposal out for that. So if we have that out, I think we can probably have more discussions around that once we have a proposal. So yeah, if there's, I guess if there's any questions around this particular effort of getting the Ansible operator supported in the SDK, we can kind of get to that right now. Otherwise, I can move over and highlight some of the upcoming changes with the controller runtime refactoring. If there's any questions?
You have a question, just unmute yourself. Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Cool. Sounds like there's no questions. So yeah, this is one of the larger pieces of progress we have moving, other than our next topic, which is changing up the controller runtime. So we can jump directly into that.
Right. Actually, can I share my screen?
Sure.
Okay. How do you do that? Oh, it's right there. Okay.
And while you're getting ready there, I just saw that Rodrigo joined from MongoDB, and I'm wondering after this chunk of the agenda, if maybe Rodrigo, is it possible for you to give us an update on the MongoDB operator?
Yeah, I guess let me prepare some notes.
Yeah.
So I can do it in a few minutes. Okay.
Okay. Take your time. Go for it.
Okay.
Okay. I'll move over to discussing another upcoming change that should land hopefully in the next couple of weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. But essentially, what we're trying to do is we're going to be replacing, I would say, pretty much all of the major APIs of the operator SDK with the controller runtime APIs. So for those of you who haven't seen this particular issue, which basically tracks the work around this effort, just some background around this. So we've had some design issues with the operator SDK APIs from the beginning. They were a bit simple kind of to begin with. We did kind of go with the approach of having some package level or global level APIs that made it easier to sort of get up and running sort of very fast. But as some of you could probably tell from the issues, like we ran into other issues like not being able to support watching multiple custom resources and actually define relationships between them. So you could, for instance, if you watch one particular resource and you want to requeue, you want to watch a secondary resource and have it requeue the events for the owner of that object, you couldn't really do that with the SDK. You could watch multiple CRs, but you would have to handle that yourself. And other things like not being able to access the informal cache. So if you want to just read objects, basically get or list objects, you have to go through the API server every single time instead of being able to utilize the informal cache. There's other things like not being able to filter incoming events based on some predicates that could be specific to the application. And so there's quite a few issues that we did run into SDK that would require a major overhaul in any case. So what we're proposing to do is basically use the controller runtime, which is an upstream library in, I think it's in Kubernetes 6 API machinery. So this is a project over here. This is basically a library that lets you essentially write controllers. With this, what we should have the ability to basically define controllers as distinct objects. Each controller can watch multiple resources, and you can define relationships between primary and secondary resources, or have your own logic for that. So just kind of get back to the issue.
Is a real life example of this? Is it like if you had a database cluster object and then a backup object that you would want to watch for both of those? Is that
right? So yeah, if your application has a top level resource called the database object, and then there's a secondary resource like kind of like the database backup object. If something changes with regards to that, or even any resource that you create under your database object, if it's a pod or service or something else that changes, or anything changes in the cluster, you'd ideally want to requeue the reconciliation loop for that primary resource all over again. And so this is kind of one of the big things that's kind of missing, which we get from the controller runtime. Right, so essentially, there's a bunch of kind of like issues that motivate the need for moving to the controller runtime, and those would be replacing our existing APIs of how we watch resources using SDK.watch, and even how we handle resources. Because right now we just have one handler that the user would register, and all the events would basically get sent to that handler. With the controller runtime, you can still do the same thing, where you have one controller within your operator that would handle all of your events for you, or you could define multiple controllers, each of which could handle different resources independently of each other. But we can get more into the specifics of that once I guess we have like a more concrete proposal around that. I just wanted to kind of highlight this issue right here, which is basically tracking the work for the refactoring of the SDK to use and generate a new project that uses the controller runtime. And so we are currently tracking the work for this in a separate branch. Right now, we're just changing the generator to scaffold a project that uses the controller runtime. And we have to do some other work around updating all of the docs. There's a few changes in the CLI that will happen. That will actually let you add multiple controllers and let you add multiple custom resource types in your project. So there's some changes to the CLI that will probably happen around that. But this issue is here for people to kind of stay up to date and kind of keep track of the changes that will be probably coming in 2 to 3 weeks. So the plan and I guess like the timeline for this is once we have the control runtime refactoring branch working, I would say we have all of the tests in place and we have all of the documentation up to I guess like speed. What we'll do is make probably like more formal proposal on the repo, so people have a chance to actually discuss any sort of high-level changes to the CLI or how the project layout works, or if there are any changes to the workflow before we actually go ahead and merge the changes into the master and cut a release for this change. This will be quite a big change. So obviously, since we are replacing our APIs, it's a breaking change. We'll try to see how much of this we can minimize on our side in the SDK, probably provide some utilities or see if we can have existing projects take the reconciliation code from the existing handlers and move that over to how the controller runtime. It's essentially the same thing, but basically it's in a different package where you define your reconciliation code. But we'll see how much of that we can handle on our end and how much of that we can facilitate with other docs.
All that code that people have written to like model their objects and like all that stuff is just
right,
comes over directly.
Right, all of that. So all of the reconciliation code that you would have for your operator would essentially stay the same. The only thing that would change is the way you currently basically get an event object in your handler, and you just use that as is. The interface changes just a little bit, where now you have access to the cache, and you can actually just look up the object that's in the cache that's in the latest state. So it's just a small interface change around how the reconciliation code gets called. But by and large, most of it should just port over to a controller runtime based project. So yeah, those changes should be upcoming, I guess, in the next couple of weeks. And we'll keep everybody else up to date on that as we make more progress on that. But yeah, I'm sure there might be quite a lot of questions on this. You can always follow up on the issue, or if you have something right now, I can answer that as best as I can.
Awesome. Thanks for walking us through that. I'm excited about it. This will probably be like one of the major changes before we can really start stabilizing it.
Right. After this sort of refactor and release, I think our APIs we probably won't have any other sort of like major changes to the API beyond this, because the controller runtime has other users beyond the SDK, and it's already pretty stabilized in terms of how they do version releases for the controller runtime. So I think that should be more stabilized than what we have right now. So yeah.
Sean Hurley has mentioned in the chat that the Ansible operator is already using the controller runtime, and you can see it in the open PR.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's actually a very good point. So for people who are interested in seeing what a controller runtime based project looks like, we should have we'll be updating the operator SDK samples repo with some sample operators to actually give some examples of that. But as Sean mentioned, we have the Ansible operator, which actually uses the controller runtime already. So you can see how that's an example of a project that uses the controller runtime. So there's a few sort of changes in terms of the project layout. You can probably go take a look at that, how the entry point changes, and then where you define your reconciliation logic in package controllers. So this should be a good example, I guess, before we have more concrete examples on the samples repo that we will take a look at.
So I apologize. The new UI on BlueJeans had me confused a little bit. So I had Sean muted. So Sean, if you want to unmute yourself now, you should be able to. Maybe, we'll see. If he has anything to add. If not, we can move on. Do you have anything else to add, Rob? Are there any other questions?
I think that's it, yeah. Just excited to see that work progress.
Good. All right, then. Rodrigo, I'm wondering if you have timed and a few slides or some words about giving a MongoDB operator update. And you are unmuted, and so you can share your screen if you.
Hey, hello guys. I don't have anything to share with you, any slides or anything. I was not prepared for it, but if I can like give you an update on the operator, the MongoDB operator, is that within the next few weeks we will start investigating about like basing our operator in the operator SDK, because what we built so far, it's basically not based on anything, right? It's based on the Kubernetes APIs, but no SDK in our code whatsoever. So that's what we're going to be start doing the next week, actually. So we are right on version 0.3. I think we're going to be version 0.4 will have to be will be related to the integration of the operator SDK. And I think we are still far from GA, at least 8 or 10 months. I wanted to ask you, like, given all the changes that you're doing on the operator SDK now, what kind of changes can we expect in the next few weeks, for the next release of the operator SDK?
So the next release that we'll do is probably that's probably going to be more of a checkpoint before we actually go ahead and make all of the breaking changes with regards to the controller runtime overhaul. So that should just be like, I think, a minor, actually probably a minor or a patch release. So there shouldn't be too many changes in that. But yeah, like I said, with the release after that, probably I think 2 to 3 weeks, with all the changes to coming in with the controller runtime. So there should be some changes to the CLI of the operator SDK in how you scaffold a new project, and then how you can add controllers and define new API definitions in your project. And by and large, the layout of the project should still be the same. The only thing that changes is exactly where you define your reconciliation code. So currently, if you use the SDK, it scaffolds the project for you, and basically you go and package stub handler, and there's a handler where you basically get events, and that's where you start writing reconcile logic. In this case, it's still pretty much the same thing, where if you scaffold a new project with controller runtime, it generates a controller for you, and that basically has a reconciler, or it's the same thing as our handler, and you would basically write your reconcile logic over there. And in this case, the only thing that changes is, instead of using the SDK's global APIs to watch and basically use the client that you currently would use using SDK.watch or SDK.create or SDK.update, you basically use the controller runtime's client that's actually backed by the cache. So essentially, you just have a client object within your handler that you could use. So even API-wise, the client is still the same, so there shouldn't be a lot of changes. It's just where you define the reconciliation code that changes in this new layout.
Okay, perfect. So would you advise me to start working on that refactoring to use the operator SDK, or just to wait a few more weeks?
I would actually, so you could start taking a look at that, but probably I would suggest you hold off if you haven't already started using the SDK. In that way, you can kind of have a fresh start of kind of generating a new project, rather than refactoring after we change everything on our end. So yeah, I would suggest you probably wait a couple of weeks for that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. So I think that's our status. We're just going through the work necessary to build our operator on top of the operator SDK. So not going to be until a month after you do that. You have this new release that we can have something more robust based on this. So that's it.
Right.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all your efforts. So has perhaps when you're ready, when the SDK is ready, send a note out on the mailing list, give people a heads up.
Right. I think probably once we're close to that, we should reach out on all the channels, probably the mailing list, the repo, probably even do a demo in the next meeting.
Yeah,
to walk everyone through that.
The next meeting would be like October 19th. So that would probably be good timing.
Right.
Yep.
I'll just add that in. Are there other people on the call who are working on operators that would like to give an update or ask a question to help move their work forward? Someone's asking, or Sean is, we ask about the test framework.
Right. Hang on. I think I might want to. Yeah. So I don't know if we actually mentioned this in any of the previous SIGs, but we have a test framework package in the operator SDK that you can currently use to actually that basically lets you write your end-to-end tests for your operator that you generated using the SDK. And so currently, what that test framework lets you do is basically you import the operator SDK's test framework package to have a starting point where you can write your end-to-end tests. What that gives you is basically some utilities around setting up global resources or resources for your tests in your namespace. And then you have a CLI command, I think it's operator SDK test, and then you give the location of your test files that runs those tests on a cluster that you can point it to by giving it a group config. And so those run the tests locally on your machine. And so the test is run locally on your machine, and it basically gives your tests like a group config to point it to a cluster. The next thing that we're looking at with the test framework is actually packaging up the end-to-end tests that you would have for your operator within the operator image. So this way, if you basically build your operator image, you can package up the end-to-end tests along with that. And then just using that image, you can run your operator in the cluster and actually test it out at the same time. So that's currently, I think, a work in progress. We have a PR out for that. And once that's done, we should have, I think, more talks around that. That's probably something else we could demo in the next SIG.
One thing I've been noodling on and need to put a proposal down for is having a default set of tests that run for all operators once we have the test framework in place. And this would be just checking that like you're writing a status out after the CR is created with the, whatever the operator is doing or whatever the current status is, just so that folks, end users can be able to know that, oh, it's running successfully, or it's still creating, or it's in error state, or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a great idea. I think we just need to kind of narrow down what are some general tests that apply to like all operators. Things like, yeah, if you're writing a status, the test framework could have a default test for that to check if any of your tests actually, if your operator actually does that or not. And there could be others, but I think you have to probably like compile a list around that first.
Yeah, just a way to kind of enforce like a base set of standards that folks can work towards for all kinds of stuff like that. Just things that we know everybody should do.
Right.
And the only other thing that I had to ask, or just is we were thinking about hosting an operator framework, hands-on, workshop-y type thing at KubeCon in Seattle in December. And if you're interested in participating in that or taking that workshop, if you can reach out to us and let us know if you'd be interested in that. I think Tony Campbell is working on the content for that. He's on the hook for it. So hopefully we'll get that off the ground. So look for an announcement around that. And if you have an operator that you're working on and you'd like a little airtime at one of these to talk about it or to get some hands-on feedback from folks, please speak up on the mailing list, and we'll give you that sometime and get some eyeballs on it for you as well.
I was curious, speaking of KubeCon, did anybody submit a talk on an operator or their operator, kind of those types of efforts?
They're not.
Yeah, I submitted a talk about both the Ansible operator and then the more general Ansible automation of Kubernetes that includes the operator plus the old broker story.
Cool.
Well, and nobody will know whether they got accepted until I think the 24th or 25th.
Yeah, I think it's soon.
Coming soon, so let us know. I also put in, and I haven't seen back yet, a request for rooms for an intro and a deep dive, sort of SIG rooms at the event too. And if they give us space, I'll let everybody know. But I haven't heard back on that either. So that may be all we have for today. Unless somebody else has an update, or Rob, you have something else you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think that's it. Just excited to see the work on some of these operators. And so I would encourage, if you've got work in progress that you want to show off, or you're tackling a particularly tough problem and you want some brainstorming, this meeting is a great place to do that. The mailing list is a great place to do that. And glad to have you all a part of the group.
All right, folks. We'll be doing this again on October 19th, the third Friday of the month. So email the list or email Rob or I, and we'll put you on the agenda, or just add yourself into the HackMD agenda and I'll make sure that it gets there next time. And I will upload the recording of this so those of us who don't take notes, like myself, can watch it again and cull all of the insights. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining. Bye.